Hello and welcome back to another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. I'm Tash.
I'm Bernice.
And we're not pundits.
We're just two women who know what a ruck is.
On today's episode, we're going to be talking international action, including the Rugby Championship, which was very exciting this weekend, and also the quarterfinal actions in the Women's Rugby World Cup. And we'll also be offering our semi-finals predictions at the end of this episode. But starting off with the TRC, we have Bernice with a big smile on her face with the Springboks winning 43-10 in Wellington. It's the All Blacks' greatest defeat, not the best weekend to be a Kiwi, but it keeps the Rugby Championship with very, very much wide open, particularly because the Los Pumas beat the Aussies by 2 points. Wow, what a weekend of international rugby in the Southern Hemisphere for the men. Let's start with your reaction, though, Bernice, as a SAFA. Particularly, the previous weekend wasn't the best result for the Springboks, but wow, how good were they this weekend?
I am so proud, and I just feel like we are so back. Yeah, it was just an amazing weekend to be a Springbok supporter. I think the previous week we were just like the whole morale of the country was just low, and we were all kind of like, oh, now we're starting a week like this. And yeah, I just think overall it was just such a great match from the Springboks compared to the previous
Yes.
week, and even the matches against Italy and Georgia and Australia. We just played a lot better rugby compared to all
Yes.
of those matches. And I think Rassie took a chance with the young and inexperienced players, and it paid off. I
Yeah.
think in the first half, the All Blacks were still very much in the game,
Yes.
and it could have gone any way. And yeah, also congratulations to Carter on his debut and also scoring a try on his debut.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. Obviously, not the result they would have wanted, and not the result he would have wanted on his debut, but still amazing to score a try on your debut. But I think up until halftime, it could have been anybody's game. And
I agree.
then from the 50th minute, the wheels just came off. The All Blacks looked a little gassed as well, and some of the writers also said that the All Blacks looked a little gassed. Yeah, I think it kind of felt like Rassie went, you guys just go out, play your game and play with confidence and let's see what happens. And you could see that all of the young players played with so much confidence. I mean, if you look at players like Ethan Hook, I cannot just say how proud I am of Ethan Hook and such. Like I know that I'm having this reaction because of Ben saying on TikTok and on the pod, like I just
Yeah,
wish
absolutely.
he did a start in the Springbok jersey. And I don't know what your thoughts were on him, but I thought he had a dream start for the
He
Springboks.
did. Yeah, I mean, as a neutral watching this was one of the best performances I've seen from the Springboks. I mean, when we've watched them in the World Cups, they win because they're very physical. They kick at the right point in time, and you've got the ice cold man of Andre Pollard holding it together. He obviously didn't feature this weekend. Manny, when he's kicking for posts, he could be improved, but in terms of a ball player and how he moves the ball around the field, there's not many fly halves that can do it much better than him. That is the strength of his game. On Ethan, when we've been talking about the URC, which is how our podcast started, for those of you who are new to our channel, we met each other through doing the URC's Women's Leadership Academy. It started off as a podcast talking about the URC, but we also talk about international rugby as well. When you talk about him, he's obviously a Sharks player, you're a Sharks fan, and but I thought he had a great start. He looked like he'd played with a lot more experience in a Springboks jersey than he had before. But I think, as you said, for that first 20 minutes, it was anyone's game. And I do think the All Blacks were very, very physical. But the phase of play on both sides, both for the Kiwis and for the Saffers, were just so good. That is like some of the quickest ball that I've seen in international rugby. And you can tell that it's a rivalry it's very deeply rooted. But you have to say the era of the All Blacks domination is over. It's not the same as it used to be 10, 15 years ago. The All Blacks is still a cracking team. But in the final 30 minutes of this weekend's fixture, the Springboks played their game and kind of dismantled the All Blacks. And if you're a Safa, wow, you're going to be proud. And if you're a Kiwi, you'll be disappointed. But equally, one each. I feel like South Africa have kept the Freedom Cup, excuse me, but then the All Blacks defended their record at Eden Park. I feel like you kind of got to be happy, but you'll also be disappointed one way or the other. But as a neutral, it's been some fantastic rugby to watch. But Cheslin Colby, for me, kept South Africa in the game. He was their kind of main attacking presence for that opening 20, 30 minutes. I don't think I'm not saying that's not to say that the rest of the Springboks side weren't good
Mhm.
for that opening 20 minutes, but I thought Cheslin really provided the attacking presence. It's a shame they had to go off for injury. And then later on, Damien Willemse, what a unit. He's a beast, isn't he? Like he was just chopping players up, like beating defenders left, right, and centre. And you could like he was so proud of his team and as he should be of his own performance at the end of that game. So that was a cracking match. And I guess it just goes to show how good the Springboks can be when they're in gear. And I don't think they'd been tested in the summer tests,
Mhm.
but against the All Blacks and the Aussies in the TRC, they have been, and they've shown that they can come out on top in that fixture. But it means that the table is very exciting. I mean, Argentina are not as much in the mix as some of the other countries, but they did beat Australia by 2 points. They were up 23-7, and then Australia just come back and score a bunch of tries. So I think that was a very interesting fixture because these are both teams, Bernice, that you're either going to be disappointed by their performance or you're going to be absolutely amazed. And I feel like there's no in between. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you. And I think both of the matches from the last 2 weeks kind of showed that, and it was evident in both of those matches. And I think Argentina built the scoreboard pressure very well in this match. And I felt
Mm,
like every time they had an opportunity, they kicked to post. They didn't necessarily kick to the touchline, but they took the opportunities and converted it into points, and they built their lead that way. And I think at the end of the day, that's kind of what took them to get the win was that scoreboard pressure, because almost the same thing happened as it did the previous week, where Australia just came back in the last few minutes of the match. And I think Argentina's lead this time around was just a tad too much for Australia to bounce back from.
yeah.
But yeah, I think those two matches it was so interesting to watch because I feel like they're very similar in terms of like where they are at currently in their
Yeah.
rugby.
Mm,
So I think it kind of lived up to the expectations of what we thought. And really just a word on Carreras. He scored 23 out of the 28 points for Argentina. And I just think he's been absolutely outstanding for them, both on attack and his decision
mm.
making. He's such a reliable kicker with the tee, just insane.
Yeah, definitely a standout player for Argentina, and Julian Montoya also getting over the line for a try. I'm biased because he used to play for Leicester and he's now gone over to France, but he's a cracking captain, cracking bloke. Glad to see him get over for some points. But yeah, just means that the TRC, I think a lot of people were predicting it to be one of the closest TRCs
Mm.
in a very long time because we'd seen what Argentina could do against the Lions, and then they kind of fluctuated against England. And then everyone was saying, oh, Australia aren't this great team and the Lions aren't like that good because Australia aren't that good, but they are. They've proven like Australia have just got better and better and better, have climbed like this in the past like 3 to 4 months, which is great to see the Aussies get better because it was kind of like a couple of months ago, it was a bit of a dismal era for Australian rugby. But now it means the TLC is very exciting. And it just goes to show that in the men's international game, kind of the top six, top eight countries in the world, everyone's just kind of beating everyone at the minute. And it's going to make
Mm.
predictions very, very difficult. Not necessarily the same with the women's game, which we'll move on to right now, talking about the quarterfinals in the Women's Rugby World Cup. The top four teams, in my opinion, are all in the semi-finals with Canada, New Zealand, France, and England all making it to the semi-finals that will be played this weekend. But Ireland were on for an upset. They lost 18-13. Oh, bless them. I saw the girls at the end, they were absolutely gutted. It was the same for all
Mm,
the other players who didn't get
yeah.
through past the quarterfinal stage, like seeing the reaction from the Scottish girls, the South African women. Like, it's tough to take, but we will get onto those fixtures. But it just goes to show that there's been some major growth in the international women's game. And as we said in last week's, or 2 weeks ago in our last podcast episode, I think we'll be talking about a very different landscape of international women's rugby at the next Rugby World Cup. And I think it will be at a similar stage, I guess. I don't like to compare the men's and the women's game, but where the top 8 teams are for the men's game, beating each other left, right, and centre, I think that will be the same with the women's game. As now, the right 4 teams, I think, are in the semi-finals, although we'll
Mm,
come on to the controversy between France and Ireland. I've got that on my list of talking points. But at the
mhm,
same time, the top 4 technically strongest teams are all in the semi-finals. So there's not really any upsets in my opinion. So let's
mm.
talk about them. But South Africa, 10-all against the Black Ferns in that first quarter final. I checked into the score and I was like, are we on for one of the biggest upsets in international women's rugby ever? Some of those tries were so physical. I think where the South African rugby DNA of playing with that huge physicality up front, not giving up, really going through the phases in the ruck and the breakdown, 5 meters out, strong set piece. We really saw that from South Africa in the first half. But then the Black Ferns, did they have a slow start? I feel like they've potentially had a slow start in the opening, some of the pool stages, and I don't want to say that to discredit the ladies from South Africa at all, but I don't think the Black Ferns realised the quality that South Africa brought, and then the second half were like, okay, we need to step it up and play better, and then kind of in the second half they just scored so many tries.
On the one hand, you felt so proud because obviously the Springbok women, they made history this weekend. And I
Yeah,
think just in general, it changed a lot for women's rugby in South Africa. I think a lot more girls will look at them and say, I also want to play rugby. And hopefully, for development purposes, we will see rugby starting at an earlier age and that girls hopefully get exposed to rugby at an earlier age, or hopefully at school level, there will be opportunities for girls. So I think it changed a lot for just like
mm,
women's rugby in general in South Africa. But yeah, I think South Africa had a very good first half. As you've mentioned, it was 10-all, and I was also like, oh, I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to say it, but
yeah,
are we gonna see one of the biggest upsets? But I think you kind of saw New Zealand's experience with
yeah,
quarterfinals come through.
for
I
sure.
think they were just a lot more composed compared to
Mm,
the Springbok women in the second half. They came out, they knew what they wanted to do, and they did it. I mean, they scored 3 quick tries and ultimately just took the Springbok women out of the game. I wouldn't say that we went down without a fight, but being
no.
trailing with that big of a margin in a quarterfinal is tough. And New Zealand just knew what they were doing because they've been there before
Mm,
multiple times. So it's tough if you haven't had that exposure. But I think even they, like, it also meant that we got exposed to that kind of pressure and that kind of
for sure.
environment, which for the next World Cup will mean so much. And for our next test, we had the up on most of the stats in the first half. We had most of the stats in our favor. I think also there were a lot of missed opportunities in the first half. I think we had 3 entries into their 22 where we just couldn't make anything out of it, which is a pity, especially in a quarterfinal. You have to take your opportunities. And
Mm.
I'm not saying we would have won the game, but it's just those fine margins. You have to take the opportunities when you get them.
Absolutely. I do agree with you about New Zealand's experience, and as well, they are very good at penetrating small gaps and
Mm,
space. Like one of Braxton Sorensen McGee's tries, who
mm,
I've mentioned her several
Amen.
times in the past few weeks because she is in the running for player of the tournament. Absolutely. She's so young. Rugby runs through her veins. But one of the tries, she's set up from a lovely break by Georgia Miller, and then Georgia's carry is great. But then the offload is very selfless as well.
Mm,
Georgia Miller's a fantastic. She's got fantastic pace and very much this hybrid athlete. But Sorrison McGee is just got that little extra more on the speed and the power
mm,
to finish at the end. Not that doesn't mean to say that Georgia doesn't have that, but she
mm,
offers a different quality that Sorrison McGee does. So that kind of attitude towards it's that I'm not saying that South Africa and other teams don't have this attitude. I just mean
mm,
a team like New Zealand are very good at individually exploiting space and then passing it to the right teammate to then score the try. I've seen Canada do it as well. I've seen the Red Roses do it too, which is very different. Again, comparing it to the men's game, we see a little bit more selfishness in the men's game, which I think can be good at times in terms of like backing yourself. But I think in the women's game, we see a lot more offloading at the right time to support your teammates. And I think New
mm,
Zealand are a prime example of this weekend, how they did that really, really well. So it's not a surprise that they won, given their experience. They've won 6 Rugby World Cups. They have started
mm,
slow, but then like really like kick into gear around whether it's the 30th minute or whether it's the second half. We've seen that in the pool
mm,
stages. We saw that in this fixture. So I think the stronger team are in the semi final. But as you said, Bernice, this is only good for South African women's rugby. And it's put them on the map. And it's just gone to show that with a bit more investment and the right infrastructure, we could be talking about a very different team in the next 4 years. And I hope we are, because I've really enjoyed watching the Springboks women play in this competition. They've been powerful, speedy, and just played with that kind of South African style of rugby. So
mm.
let's briefly talk about the quarterfinal between Canada and Australia. Canada kind of win comfortably 46-5. First try coming from Hogan Rochester showed their physicality and that they're also able to manipulate the space out wide. And again, the phases of play from Canada when they're in the attack, it looks like their cohesion is spot on. Their attacking phases, like what they've been doing in training, is coming out well on the pitch. And okay, Australia get their only score from Desiree Miller, who I think has had a phenomenal tournament. She's definitely been a standout player for me across the board. But overall, Australia couldn't seem to keep it together. Or is it because Canada are just too good and their attacking plays are excellent? Because I do think Australia were really good in the defence and kept Canada back to a degree. But I just think Canada are really fantastic on the attack. And coming into the semi final against the Black Ferns, you've got two teams who play with great physicality, but also excellent at exploiting space and gaps and picking the right lines and knowing when to go either chop it outside on the wing or cut back inside. They have that experience, and I will be making some predictions on who we think will win that semi final, but I think it's going to be a close one to call. Overall, just going on stats, I think Canada will have the Black Ferns up front, but I think in terms of working tries and finding the gaps in the backs, I think the Black Ferns could do very well on that. I think we'll see a real mixture of great team tries and great individual performances this weekend, but I don't know. Initially I predicted it's going to be a Black Ferns Red Roses final.
Mm.
Hopefully with England winning. Big hope. Touch wood, touch the wood right here. But I don't know. Have been, I don't think Canada have been really tested in this tournament at all. I think the Black Ferns will be their first test. But given on their performance, I am going to change my predictions and I'm going to say Canada are going to win. And I'm going to say they're going to win by 3 points.
Like that excites me so much. I was watching the Canada match and I was watching the Black Ferns match, and I also thought if these two sides play each other, like that's going to be one insane semi-final. And it's
Absolutely.
almost at that point where it's so tough to predict. And I don't think either of those sides have really been tested
Mm,
in their pool matches. Yes,
mhm.
like South Africa, like in the first half, they were great. But in terms of composure and like knowing how to win matches, I think this is going to be the first test for them. And it will be good to see how they handle the pressure. And I also like I can't even believe that I'm gonna say this because I thought it would be just a clear cut, no, Black Ferns
Mm.
will
Hmm.
win this. But yeah, I do think you have a good point there with Canada maybe taking the win. So yeah, I think I'm gonna have to agree with you. I'll say Canada by 5,
Still tight,
and
isn't it?
we'll see. But yeah, I think on the Australia versus Canada match, it was a very, very much a one-sided
Mm.
affair. As you've said, like Miller scored the try. She's been great throughout the season for Australia. But yeah, they basically dominated most of the match with both their set pieces and their open play. They scored 5 tries in the first half, and in the second half, Australia had some of the possession, but they couldn't really convert anything into points and couldn't really capitalize on it. But yeah, it was a great match from Canada.
They've just been really strong. I think their set piece has been really, really good, and it's gone.
Yeah.
They are the right team to be in the semi final. They've shown why they are ranked number two in the world. So you're getting world number two versus world number three in a semi final. Like this is literally means the rankings are very accurate. That's for sure. But it will be a great showdown. And even though we've both said that Canada could win this by 3 points, in my case by 5 points in Bernice's, previously the Black Ferns have been Canada 17 times. It's quite a lot. They've had one draw, which was the most recent game back in May this year, and it was 27 all. And I think if that sheds light on where Canada are in terms of their form, I think that is very much true to how they've performed in this tournament. I think overall, Canada have had quicker starts than the Black Ferns, but I think the Black Ferns finished very well. So I do think this will be an 80-minute game that will go down to the absolute wire. And if there's going to be a continuation of the trend that we've seen throughout this Rugby World Cup, these women do not give up. We saw it in the quarterfinal of England v Scotland, Rona Lloyd's try on the 82nd minute. And even though Scotland were never going to win that match because England had scored plenty of
Yeah.
tries. They that like the last time they'd scored something was the penalty very early on in the first half. But it just goes to show their resilience. We also saw it in Spain in the pool stages that scoring a lot of last minute tries, Christina Blanco getting over the line in several fixtures. So these ladies do not give up. And that will definitely be tested to the max in the semi-final between New Zealand and Canada. I think we'll both be watching that one. And oh my goodness, cannot wait to see who comes out on top, what the drama on the field is going to be like, and we'll be giving our reactions on our channels and on another episode of Her Side of the Ruck. But moving on to the next quarterfinals, the tightest one of all four of them, France, Ireland, 18-13. Now, I had a lot of comments on the video that I made last week, just talking about roundup, etc., saying, oh, the French will kind of demolish the Irish. No, they didn't. And I said, if the French are having a bad day, which they can just do what the French do. Do you know what I mean? And just go, oh, have a bit of a fluky start, which I don't think I think they had a slow start. But Ireland, they came out guns blazing. I feel like they've really excelled in this tournament. And okay, they were coming off a loss against the Black Ferns, and it does put into perspective how good England, Canada, and New Zealand are, given the scores and stuff. Like France are kind of that halfway house between those top three teams, Ireland, Australia, USA, Scotland, a couple of other nations that kind of France kind of come here in between those top three teams and the rest of the teams. But Ireland was so good. And it's very unlucky that they didn't go on to beat France. France are definitely a second half team because every time I've watched them, it's like they're a bit bipolar in the sense of they're a bit like, oh, we're playing rugby in the first like 30 to 40 minutes. And then they pull out some absolute magic in the last 40. We saw it in the Women's Six Nations this year with the 43-42 scoreline at Twickenham or at the Allianz in Twickenham against England. They performed better in the warm up game against England, although I'll come on to that. They weren't anywhere near as good as I'd previously seen them, although England were far better than I'd seen them play, like set piece wise, just in terms of their attacking and defensive form. They were much stronger than France overall. But Ireland were great. And I think they should feel very proud of themselves. I think they've really done women's rugby in Ireland absolute justice in this tournament. Again, another team in 4 years' time, we'll be talking about a very different side. And I just hope that the Irish Rugby Union just kind of go, this is what our women can do. Let's put more infrastructure behind them so they can really kick on because I think they've been really fantastic in this tournament.
Definitely. And I also think that obviously there were no upsets this weekend or no surprises, and this was the match that got the closest to it actually being an upset.
Yeah, for sure.
So it like I really enjoyed watching that match, and even though the weather made it difficult for both of the teams, especially in terms of like the territorial kicking,
For sure.
I felt like both teams kind of handled it quite well. We saw the weather in uh, numerous matches this weekend. It was just oh, it
It's
was.
it's been so bad in England. I mean, I was obviously I live in London at the minute. I'm currently
Mm.
in North Wales on a trip with my sister. So, but the weather in the UK the past few days, it's just gone from being a lovely summer to sunshine and rain, sunshine and rain. But this weekend for the quarterfinals, it's just been sleeting rain. It's been crazy pretty much in all four of those matches. The rain, it's definitely been wet, a lot of wet weather rugby, and I feel like the scoreline between France and Ireland definitely showed that it was wet weather rugby for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, yeah, so obviously looking at the match, Ireland led the scoreboard 13-0 half time,
Mm.
and then France went on to score 18 unanswered points in the second half, which is like you have to give credit to France for that. I think
Yeah.
that's really also shows what a good side they are. The same with the Black Ferns, like finishing quite strong. I think France also lacked discipline in the first half, which allowed Ireland for more opportunities.
Mm.
But yeah, they were just a lot stronger in this, like France were a lot stronger in the second half, and they controlled the game well despite actually losing players to cards, which is insane. But yeah, in the final minutes, Ireland had an opportunity. They did have a line out, but unfortunately, a line out miscue prevented them from making good use of that opportunity. But I think well deserved to France. They played well throughout the
Yeah,
entire Rugby World Cup. And yeah, it's going to be exciting to see that semi-final.
for sure. I also note on Morgan Bourgeois, I thought her boot is very much something that that France have relied on in all international fixtures, and she really proved why she's in that squad and why she is one of the top point scorers in like the women's Six Nations because she just consistently slots stuff over. And I guess her conversions and the penalties, that was the difference between France winning that
Yeah.
game and going on to the semi-final and Ireland
Yeah.
not winning that game. So her boot, she's got a golden boot, that's for sure. Just want to touch on the controversy that happened. So Aoife Wafer, fantastic ball carrier in the Irish pack. She had just come back from an injury to make her first appearance in this quarterfinal. Absolutely fantastic. Great that she got her cap at a Rugby World Cup because she absolutely deserves it. Great young athlete to be watching on the international stage. Now, in kind of in a scrum, I think it was either a breakdown or a scrum. You have Axel, please forgive me if I do not pronounce her name correctly because my French is a shocker, that's for sure. Axel Berthomeu. There's like a lot of imagery, both video and still images of her literally like biting, like fully jaw open, biting Aoife Wafer. And the Irish captain kind of like brings it up with the referee a couple of times. The TMO doesn't review it, they don't review it at all. And then now the French player has been cited since that match. I think that behaviour is so poor. It does not
Mm.
belong in rugby at any level. It's also very dangerous for several reasons, not only to the player, but it's just completely unhygienic as well. Like if the teeth are kind of like indented in the skin even further, that causes a lot more medical issues for the team to sort
Yeah.
out that isn't a traditional rugby incident. That behaviour has no place in rugby, and it's a shame that it's happened in this Women's Rugby World Cup that has been shone a bright, bright light on the women that are on the field, their personalities on the field, their skill on the field, but also who they are off of it. This is not the kind of behaviour that should happen in rugby union, and for me, it's a big no-no. So this player deserves to be cited and disciplined, and quite frankly, banned from playing in the semi-final. That's just my opinion. Your thoughts,
Yeah.
Bernice?
Kind of to add on what you've said, I think throughout the World Cup, we've seen, teams like Samoa and the Springboks and the Black Ferns after their match, like dancing together, celebrating
Mm,
together. And we've spoken a lot about it on the podcast, like how the unity has been between teams and like how good the vibes are. And, kind of this is what rugby is about. And for something to happen like that, where the French player bit Aifa, like it kind of left like a bad taste in my mouth because I was
yeah, for sure.
like it's gone so well. Like there was no, there's your usual cards and your usual incidents, but nothing
Mm,
like that. And yeah, like I have to agree, there's no place for that in sport, not in the men's rugby union, not in women's rugby union. Yeah, I think rightly so that she's been cited, and it's going to be
yeah.
interesting to see what the verdict is. But yeah, I just think it's unfortunate and
Mm,
it's not great to see because I really don't think it's in the spirit of the game. And I was very shocked to see that something like that happened because, you get like a tip tackle, it's in the like the heat of the moment, but something like that is, yeah, I don't know, just leaves a
yeah,
bad taste in your mouth.
yeah, for sure. And then the final quarter-final was between England and Scotland. I thought the Scots did a very good job of keeping England out for the first 20 minutes. And then after that, the Red Roses kicked into gear. I think that again, this is the difference between the top three teams and then the teams that are ranked below them. It is that consistency. And we saw it, I guess, particularly in the pool stages between the USA and England. It was it's a very tight contest for the opening 15, 20 minutes. I was a bit nervous. I was a bit like, what's happening with the Red Roses? And then after that, you're like, oh, right, okay. And then
Mm,
I'm not saying it's boring because the Red Roses won't score on loads of points, but like in that game against the USA, it was like, okay, they scored again, great. They scored again, great. I
mm.
mean, great because I'm English and I
Yeah.
just want the Red Roses to win for sure. But it's just like what that competition was at the start lacked later on. England just so good up front. You can rotate, they can have a different front row, rotate them out, and still be equally as class as the initial front row. I think John Mitchell has a wealth of players in his squad. Same with the fly halves. There's a real contest between who gets that 10 shirt for the Red Roses because Holly Aitchison slotted 5 out of 6 kicks for the post. Zoe Harrison has been, I suppose, the favoured pick initially.
Mm,
Aitchison had a bit of I think, a niggle. It was either like an ankle niggle or something to do with a foot or something. So that's one of the reasons why she didn't start in those opening pool stages. So, but Zoe Harrison performed so well in those initial stages. People were like, "Oh, Mitchell's got a decision on his hands, which fly half he's going to start." But I feel like Aitchison's just gone. I really want to rep the jersey. I mean, it would make sense if you've got two fly halves on the bench. I can understand why you would do that. But when you've got a versatile player like someone like Meg Jones, who can play fly half, but she's more of an outside centre, you don't
mm,
necessarily need an option of 3 10s in your 23 squad. But yeah, I thought she had a great kicking game. The Red Roses deserve to be in the semi-final. That's not to say that Scotland don't. I think Scotland have performed incredibly well at this Rugby World Cup, but we have to put a clear distinction between the two sides. The RFU have been much better at putting in contracts for women's rugby than the SRU have. Now, I know that I used to work for the SRU. I'm going to put that out there. I don't want to say anything bad about them as an organisation because I had a great time when I worked with them. However, by not investing in women's rugby, there is always going to be a clear gap when it comes to the international stage. Now, when people say it's like when we had the conversation about England v Samoa, of course, England are going to score tons and tons of points against Samoa because Samoa are not professional. These are effectively women who work full-time jobs outside of rugby and play rugby because they care about it or they're full-time mothers. That's not necessarily the same extreme for Scotland. There was never going to be a good conversation to have a debate about contracts pre-Rugby World Cup, post-Rugby World Cup, in the middle of the World Cup. I mean, that would have been worse timing. But like it puts uncertainty. And of course, you're going to be worried as a player if your future is uncertain with your contract. So I love the SRU a lot. I have some great memories of working there. I just really hope that they put more money into women's rugby because they have fantastic players and they've done so well getting to the quarter final. But that long term investment that the RFU put into women's rugby is paying off so far. in this Rugby World Cup, and touch wood, may it continue. So that means that England play France in the semi-final. Now, just before we give our predictions, here are some of the stats breakdowns. England have beaten France 42 times, 16 consistent in a row. England have also broken the world record for consecutive wins, 31 consecutive wins. I do not see them losing to France at all. If they lose to France, that will be a massive upset.
I also have the Red Roses to win, I think by 10. But I do think France are one of those teams where anything can happen on any day. And even just like in semi-finals in general in a World Cup, like anything can happen. Any team can bring on an upset. And France is just like one of those teams where you just never know. And they've been good throughout the season. But I am predicting the Red Roses to win by 10. But yeah, you never know what can happen on the day, especially with France.
France are always up for playing England. I mean, what nation isn't? I think when it's the men's game or the women's game, France are always up for playing
Yeah.
England. But just in terms of the writing on the wall, for me, Red Roses to win by 16. But I still think it'll be a good game, but I don't think it'll be as tight as between the Black Ferns and Canada. Thank you so much for watching. That's all we've got time for on this episode of Her Side of the Ruck. If you did enjoy this episode, please leave a like and comment below. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button because we really appreciate it. We're nearly close to 300 subs, so if you can hit that sub button, yes please, get us to 300 and then keep it climbing. Thank you so much for watching. Signing off is me, Tash.
Signing off from South Africa is me, Bernice.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.